Hello, and thank you for joining us today for the June 2017 Food Safety Update. My name is Katrina Levine, and I'm an Extension Associate in Food Safety and Nutrition at NC State University. I work under Food Safety Specialist Dr. Ben Chapman to help do research, create materials, and train Extension professionals like yourselves in safe food handling so we can help reduce the risk of foodborne illness among ourselves and those we serve. This presentation was originally given as a Zoom meeting webinar on June 9, 2017. This version is a re-recording and therefore may differ from the original webinar. Today's update will cover food safety best practices related to transporting food and ingredients, preparing and serving food at temporary events, and controlling allergens. We'll also talk about food safety concerns related to recent foodborne illness outbreaks. Why is food safety a concern? First, it's difficult to control food temperatures when we travel. We don't take our refrigerators or freezers with us, and the equipment and tools we use to keep cold foods cold and hot foods hot are not ideal. Second, harmful bacteria grow quickly between 41 degrees and 135 degrees Fahrenheit, what we call the temperature danger zone, so perishable foods and beverages won't stay safe long when being transported. Fortunately, there are things we can do to reduce the risk of getting foodborne illness from foods that must be transported. Bacteria grow like this. They start out slow, the lag phase, then grow rapidly, the exponential phase, when conditions are right. The prime temperature for bacterial growth is between 70 and 95 or 110 degrees. Bacteria like to grow most quickly in this temperature range. Then bacteria reach a saturation point where there are only a certain number of them that can survive based on the amount of space and nutrients available to them, the stationary phase. So their total numbers aren't growing anymore. Then they begin to die off when they're out of what they need to survive. This is called the death phase. In that rapid growing or exponential phase, which is typically 70 to 95 or 110 degrees, right in the middle of the danger zone, how quickly do bacteria grow? They double about every 15 minutes. After an hour, there's quite a bit more than the start. The bacteria have doubled 4 times. Imagine how many there would be after a couple of hours. Why does this matter? Because bacteria double so quickly in the danger zone, it doesn't take long to reach amounts that can make us sick. One study of the temperature of foods left in the trunk of a car showed that it only takes 10 minutes for those foods to reach danger zone temperatures. The researchers also found that 90% of the food items in sack lunches were at unsafe temperatures. So naturally we worry about how long food is in the danger zone when it comes to food we prepare, serve, and eat. One example is meals for kids. Schools follow strict guidance when preparing foods in schools, but things change when food is being prepared and served outside of that school kitchen and cafeteria. One of Dr. Chapman's students did some research a few summers ago on summer nutrition programs in our state and how they were doing in terms of food safety. For those of you not familiar with summer nutrition programs, they are federally funded programs that help provide food to school-age kids during the summer when school isn't in session. Foods are often served at open sites outside of school cafeterias that are more convenient for the kids who need them. There is an added food safety risk compared to just serving meals in a cafeteria because they now have to be transported to these open sites. These include neighborhoods, churches, community centers, parks, and other sites. However, with the addition of transporting food, several new factors must be considered in terms of food safety, such as ensuring proper temperature maintenance, possibilities for contamination, and activities at the feeding site. Summer temperatures provide yet another challenge in keeping food at safe temperatures when it's hot. The data Dr. Chapman's student found showed that people handling the food wore gloves about 50% of the time, and that nearly all, 96%, had a sink available for hand washing. They also encouraged the children to wash their hands about 70% of the time. The lessons here are: don't touch ready-to-eat food with your bare hands. If you have a hand washing sink, use it and make sure it has soap and paper towels, and ask others to use it too. As for temperatures, more care was taken to control temperature when transporting cold, such as transporting on ice, or 85%, compared to hot. Just under half used a method to keep hot during transport. Some sites did try to keep food cold while serving, about 28%, but even fewer tried to keep food hot, about 7%. We know using things like ice and coolers helps keep food cold, but methods for keeping food hot may not be accessible or familiar. Since transporting hot food may be a challenge, and we know time in the danger zone is what matters most, tracking time after preparation may be the best strategy for hot foods. Nearly all sites transported food in under 45 minutes, with an average time of 18 minutes, and left food out for under an hour, although one site out of 17 left food out for about 2.5 hours. An important limitation to point out is that they didn't know how long food sat after prep, but before transport. And looking at the data as is, it seems like most places then only had food out for about 2 hours, but it could have been a lot longer since we don't know how it was handled before transport. Science tells us that food must be eaten or tossed within 4 hours of being in the danger zone, and these meals could be dangerously close to that cutoff point. Again, monitoring time matters. Some open-ended or qualitative data was collected on who was responsible, schools, feeding sites, or both, for cleaning and sanitizing of transport containers, but these data were difficult to interpret. They often didn't know if the containers were being regularly cleaned and sanitized, or they said they only did it as needed. Many times, there seemed to be no real plan in place for whose job it was to keep them cleaned and sanitized. This is important because often you are sharing transport and other equipment with others, and there may be no plan in place for who is keeping up with maintenance like this. The only way to be sure that you're using a cleaned and sanitized container to transport food for your programming is to do it yourself or be certain that someone else is. But there's more to think about when it comes to summer programming aside from just hand washing and temperature control. Consider how to keep food safe when preparing and handling foods and ingredients. For example, access to hand washing facilities and making sure food handlers aren't working when ill. Think about food storage, how to keep food cold versus hot, packing considerations like the size of container for cooling, and labeling and date marking. It may seem like a pain to have to worry about how to make sure surfaces, including transport equipment, are kept cleaned and sanitized, but it's so important to make sure all of those foods and ingredients you worked so hard to get and prepare don't get cross-contaminated. We often forget about chemical interactions, but this can be an issue when it comes to storage and labeling. Think about how to keep food separate from cleaning and other chemicals that you may be bringing or storing food near. Finally, consider transportation, which we'll talk more about later in this update. This includes aspects of all of the above, such as using clean transport containers, packing and labeling properly, and monitoring temperature during storage. There are 2 ways to monitor time and temperature of foods to make sure they stay safe. The first is to monitor the time in the danger zone. You will need to be diligent about checking temperatures if you use this method. The second is time in lieu of temperature, or time and temperature control for safety. If you can't or don't want to monitor temperature, you can start the clock at a specific time and then write a toss-by date that's 4 hours from the start time, or 1 hour if it's outside with a temperature above 90 degrees. This means that you have 4 hours or 1 to consume or toss the food or ingredient. If you're not monitoring temperatures during transport, your start would begin when you take food out of refrigeration. In theory, it could still be in the safe zone for a little while, which would buy you more time, but you can't be certain when it entered the danger zone if not checking temperatures. As we saw, it can take as little as 10 minutes to reach the danger zone. These foods we need to monitor, known as TCS, or Time and Temperature Control for Safety foods, are types of foods that should be kept in portable cold storage units. This means that they must either be held at or below 41 degrees Fahrenheit or consumed within 4 hours, or 1 hour if the temperature is above 90 degrees Fahrenheit. TCS foods include deli sandwiches, such as ones made with turkey, ham, roast beef, or chicken and tuna salads, cut fresh fruit and vegetables, especially melons, tomatoes, and leafy greens, and dairy products such as milk, yogurt, and cheeses. The cut fresh fruit category excludes whole fruit and prepackaged, shelf-stable cut fruit like fruit cups and applesauce. However, it does include foods prepared with cut fresh fruit or vegetables, such as a peanut butter and banana sandwich, salads, or a fresh fruit cup. We don't recommend using sprouts at all because they are such a high-risk food. Planning ahead can help you choose ways to prepare and package food for transport that reduces the risk of foodborne illness. If you are able, find out the details of the transport situation, including where food will be going, how long it will take to get there, and how long it may be sitting before being served. Check to see how much food will be needed and what resources, such as coolers and containers, you have for packaging and transporting the food. Think about the weather or environmental conditions during the trip. Will it be very hot? Will food be held near a sunny window? Consider when the food will be packaged and when it will be eaten. How long will the food be kept in transportation storage containers? Think about the amount of food that may need to be kept cold and the equipment available for cold storage transport. Will the coolers be big enough, and do they seal completely? Can TCS foods be packaged separately from non-TCS foods to minimize cooler space needed? Also, consider any food allergies or special dietary needs. How can you prevent cross-contamination of allergy-free foods? These factors can affect what type of food is packaged and how it is packaged for transport. For example, if adequate coolers are not available, select foods that do not need to be kept cold for safety, such as whole fruit or plain nut butter sandwiches. It is important not to overpack coolers or use ones that do not seal tightly, because this will make it harder to keep foods cold enough. Using the same transport container for regular and allergy-free foods could lead to cross-contamination. Keep things like reusable ice packs, as well as coolers, cleaned and sanitized. Use ice packs to keep food cold, or if using loose ice, make sure the food stored in it is wrapped securely to prevent melted ice water from getting into the food. Keep a thermometer in the cooler to track its temperature. When planning ahead, keep allergens and special dietary needs in mind. Find out if there are any food allergies or special needs. Prevent cross-contamination of allergy-free foods. Prepare and assemble them separately using cleaned and sanitized equipment and surfaces, and keep any allergen-free foods separate when packing. Clearly label any special foods and make sure the person distributing the food knows where they are. Food allergies and special dietary needs seem to be a lot more common now, and you'll probably have at least one participant in your time with EFNEP that has a food allergy. But why do we care about them when it comes to food safety? Let's start off with a little bit of background. The USDA defines a food allergy as a specific type of adverse food reaction involving the immune system. When someone eats a food, they can develop antibodies, specifically immunoglobulin E, to components in that food. Antibodies are like the body's alert system. When the person has that food or ingredient again, the antibodies will recognize the ingredient and alert the immune system to react, causing an allergic reaction. Specifically, it is the protein in these foods or food components that cause the reaction. Food allergies are different from food sensitivities and intolerances. Although all three may share some similar symptoms like nausea, stomach pain, diarrhea, and vomiting, food allergies are typically more severe and can be life-threatening. Anaphylaxis is characteristic of severe food allergies and causes a sudden drop in blood pressure and trouble swallowing or breathing, among other symptoms. Why are food allergies important? They affect 4 to 8% of children and 2% of adults in the U.S. They are the leading cause of anaphylaxis. Each year, anaphylaxis due to food causes 30,000 emergency room visits 2,000 hospitalizations, and 150 deaths. Forgetting to label a snack or sample as containing peanuts, for example, could mean the difference between life and death for someone with a peanut allergy. You may have a lot of people tell you that they are allergic to this food or that, but in reality it may be more of an intolerance, or even that they just don't like that food. True allergies are always to proteins, so to whatever protein is in that food. If you remember basic chemistry, proteins are those macromolecules made up of one or more chains of amino acids and are found in all living organisms, so most food products. Proteins are not oils, fats or lipids, or sugars, carbohydrates. Refined and filtered oils only contain lipids and won't cause allergic reactions. Lactose is a sugar, so lactose intolerance is not an allergy either. According to the USDA, there are more than 160 foods that can cause IgE allergic reactions. The Food Allergen Labeling and Consumer Protection Act, or FALCPA, which was passed in 2004 and effective starting in 2006, identified the top 8 foods or ingredients responsible for food allergies. They are eggs, milk, soy, wheat, peanuts, also called ground nuts, tree nuts, such as almonds, walnuts, and pecans, fin fish, such as bass, flounder, and cod, and shellfish, such as crab, shrimp, and lobster. Foods containing these ingredients, or a protein derived from one of them, are considered one of the major 8 allergens. The FALCPA requires that the labels of products regulated by the FDA, including packaged foods, but excluding meat, poultry, and egg products, list any allergens contained in the product. While meat and poultry allergies are very rare, some processed meat and poultry products may contain additives derived from one of the major allergens. For example, processed chicken nuggets, hot dogs, and canned soup can contain non-fat dry milk or hydrolyzed wheat protein. Look on the ingredient labels of packaged and processed products to check for potential allergens. Companies can also put voluntary statements on their products that alert people if it contains ingredients that might cause allergies, sensitivities, or intolerances. For example, contains milk, wheat gluten, soy, is accepted by FSIS. You may also see clarification on the ingredients list where an ingredient is described in more detail in parentheses. An example of this would be whey in parentheses from milk. Again, though, these are voluntary. Another voluntary practice is indicating any potential cross-contamination or cross-contact between an allergen and the product. Usually this occurs when products share production lines or equipment. For example, you may see, may contain, and then whatever the allergen is, or produced in a facility that also uses, and whatever the allergen is. However, the FDA urges that these statements are not a substitute for following good manufacturing practices and must be truthful and not misleading. We are concerned about hidden sources of allergens and about cross-contamination from allergens. Prepared and prepackaged foods such as salad dressings, soups, sauces, boxed mixes, cookies, crackers, baked goods, and even canned tuna, among other foods, can all contain hidden sources of allergens. Checking the label is the only way to determine the ingredients in a prepackaged or prepared food. If it doesn't have a label, do not guess, but ask whoever is selling the product, or someone working at the store you are purchasing it from, to find out or use a different ingredient that has information. In the kitchen, allergen-containing foods or ingredients could come in contact with a lot of different things: cooking equipment, utensils, countertops and surfaces, and uncovered or exposed foods or ingredients. One way is by directly contaminating these things, such as from a spill, or by using them to make foods with ingredients that contain potential allergens. Some allergens can indirectly cause cross-contamination of a surface, piece of equipment, food, or ingredient if their particles can be carried through the air, such as from dust or flour. It is unknown how far these allergen-containing particles could travel. It is important to note that cooking or heating has little effect on how allergenic a food is, unlike some bacteria and viruses. While it may destroy some of the allergens, simply cooking the raw ingredient or food will not completely get rid of the potential for the food to cause an allergic reaction in people who have an allergy. When preparing food, and not just for allergen control, don't forget the basics. Wash your hands before starting, use clean and sanitized equipment and surfaces, keep assembled food and cut foods in tightly wrapped or sealed containers, and hold TCS foods below 41 degrees or above 135 degrees Fahrenheit until ready to pack. You may decide to prepare food ahead of time instead of the day of. In this case, allow for proper cooling of any cut or cooked ingredients. Also, monitor how long food is out during prep and assembly, because any time spent in the danger zone counts toward that 4 or 1 hour time limit. When it comes to doing any preparation off-site and serving food, think ahead about food needs. Find out if there will be access to hand-washing facilities near where people will be eating. Try to plan a time when food will be eaten. We've already mentioned this, but know ahead of time if there are any special dietary needs, such as food allergies, that will need to be accommodated. If items are placed in portable food transport units, such as coolers, keep the units tightly closed until meals are distributed. These units should have a thermometer inside of the unit, and the temperature of the perishable foods should not be above 70 degrees for more than 4 hours. Plan to serve foods and beverages within 4 hours unless outside temperature is above 90 degrees. If so, use the 1 hour rule. Record the time that the meals are served. Again, keep any allergen-free foods separate to avoid cross-contaminating them. Store transport containers and foods out of direct sunlight and away from engines. We just mentioned recording the time the food is served. The best practice is to write down as much as you can, including where you purchased your ingredients, how they were stored and prepared, how they were transported, and how they were handled when you arrived to the site where they were served. As extension professionals, we're liable if anything goes wrong during our programs, so collecting this information can help identify any causes or issues if something goes wrong and someone gets sick. Hopefully this will never happen, but it's good insurance if something does happen, especially if our actions are not to blame. It's a good idea to keep a logbook or binder to track this information and carry it with you when you do programs. One of our priorities should be to protect our clients. We should do this by using the correct equipment and materials to manage food safely. We should use foods that are low risk or where we can effectively control the risks, and use equipment that is cleanable and sanitizable. Have a plan for how to handle and manage different situations and risks. Writing it down is best so that everyone involved is on the same page. Finally, use tools to verify, like a thermometer to check temperatures and a log to record them. Keeping up to date on our information is one way we can help protect our clients. One recent food safety issue deals with frozen foods. Let me ask this question. Do you consider frozen foods ready to eat? Frozen foods, especially frozen produce, have not been traditionally associated with foodborne illness until now. Some recent frozen food recalls are making us rethink these societal norms and assumptions. One example you may remember is the CRF Foods recall in 2016. At least 8 people were hospitalized and massive amounts of product were recalled due to Listeria contamination. Another example is with frozen berries, where several recalls have been issued within the past few years due to hepatitis A. Here's the science behind this issue. Often we serve produce cold, so it intuitively doesn't make sense to cook frozen produce to cool it down again. And there is this assumption that it is treated effectively during processing to kill any potential bacteria. What we are learning is that this may be true for some foods, but less so for others. For example, frozen fruit may not be ready to eat, and ready-to-eat frozen kale isn't yet available in the U.S. Scientists are still studying the different foods so we can learn more about the effect of these food industry processing treatments on pathogen reduction. You might be thinking, well, I put frozen fruits in my smoothies and sometimes frozen vegetables. Now what? Try to find out if the frozen produce is considered ready to eat by looking on the packaging or checking for product information online or at the store. If you're still not sure, or it's not ready to eat, cook the food first and chill it down or refreeze. Heat treatment by cooking followed by safe cooling is the best risk reduction method. It may seem like more work, but it's a minor adjustment when compared to the problems it could cause if someone gets sick. One other food product that is now on our radar is raw flour. This really started to become an issue back in 2009. There was an outbreak of E. coli linked to Nestle Toll House cookie dough that made over 77 people in at least 30 states sick. They got sick by eating raw dough, but it wasn't because of the eggs, but because of the raw flour. Why the flour? Flour does not ordinarily undergo a kill step to kill pathogens that may be present, unlike the other ingredients in the cookie dough, like the pasteurized eggs, molasses, sugar, baking soda, and margarine. Most consider flour to be a raw agricultural product, meaning that the only way to kill potential bacteria in it is to cook with it. Raw flour can be made safe by heat treating, pasteurization, or irradiating it at the processing level before it is sold. Irradiated flour is not yet available. Levels of irradiation needed to kill bacteria in flour are higher than that needed to control insects, so further study is needed before it's approved for sale. Chocolate wasn't the culprit in the Toll House outbreak either, since eating chocolate chip cookie dough was less strongly associated with the illnesses when compared with eating the other flavors. This caused scientists to look more closely at foods containing raw flour. More outbreaks linked to raw flour have followed. General Mills gold medal flour contaminated with STEC, E. coli 0121 and 026, caused 63 illnesses in 24 states from December 2015 to September 2016. At this time, though, it didn't necessarily have to come from intentionally eating the raw flour product. Investigators found that although some people did eat the raw dough, some children got sick from playing with raw dough at restaurants, meaning it was probably on their hands and they didn't wash their hands well or at all before eating. So cross-contamination is also a concern with raw flour. The most recent flour-related outbreak was in Robin Hood Ardent Mills all-purpose flour contaminated with E. coli 0121. 26 people in Canada became ill from using this flour between November 2016 and April 2017. You may also remember an outbreak linked to farm-rich frozen pizza that made 35 people sick in 19 states in 2013. Although a frozen food, the E. coli 0121 contamination was due to the flour. There is still a lot we don't know about how flour becomes contaminated or how widespread the contamination, which makes it hard to decide what to do about it. We do know that E. coli can spread through animal feces, so wildlife pooping in and around fields could be a cause. Untreated irrigation water could spread the bacteria too, or there could be some sort of cross-contamination during the milling process. No one knows how long E. coli or other pathogens persist in dry foods like flour, but literature points to it being a long time, though, if Salmonella is a model. The bottom line is that we're still learning. A question that was brought up from the original webinar that we'll answer now is if pasteurized or heat-treated flour is available. The answer is yes, but not in typical grocery stores. The reason most companies don't heat treat it before selling is because it can negatively affect its baking properties and possibly the added cost to the company, as I had said in the webinar, but sources specifically mention baking properties, especially for breads. Some food manufacturing companies do use it for making their products, though. There are now raw cookie dough-like products available that have been made with pasteurized products like flour. Nestle does now use pasteurized flour in its raw cookie dough because of the outbreak back in 2009. Assume that all flour products, even those of non-wheat grains, are raw agricultural products and not pasteurized, unless they say otherwise on the package. For pre-made dough products, the best bet is to check the packaging for whether or not it is pasteurized or safe to eat raw. You will likely see something like, not a ready-to-eat food, cook before eating, or intended for cooking. One last point to mention about raw flour is that there's also the concern for using it in other activities, especially for kids. Remember how some kids got sick just from playing with raw pizza dough? The same thing could happen if they get raw flour on their hands that happens to be contaminated and then don't wash their hands before eating, touching their mouths, as we know kids do, or other activities where their hands end up in their mouths or foods get cross-contaminated. They could end up eating those pathogens and getting sick. I came across this one blog post where someone posted just such an activity, making something called marshmallow Play-Doh, which sounds to me like something you'd want to eat, but at least she did say it wasn't for eating. One reader posted a comment in response to her post, cautioning readers about the dangers of using raw dough in activities with kids. I just want to point out that any recipe with raw flour is not edible, especially for little ones. Raw flour can contain E. coli. A single teaspoon of this Play-Doh can potentially put your child in the hospital for the rest of his short life. The chances are indeed low, but the risk is very high. One woman who spent 4 years in agonizing pain before her death after tasting a bit of raw cookie dough and contracting salmonella warned never to take the chance. It's not worth. Flour to dust also travels through the air, same as you'd worry about for allergens, and could land on a ready-to-eat food like a snack you're serving along with activity. If contaminated, that flour dust could contaminate that ready-to-eat food. We haven't heard of any outbreaks related to this yet, but it is a possibility to be aware of. One of the best ways to stay informed about the products you're using for your programs is to sign up for the FDA recall alerts. These will keep you up to date on any product recalls so you can avoid those in your programs. You can also read Dr. Chapman's blog, Barf Blog, which reports on current food safety issues, including outbreaks and recalls. We've come to the end of our update. Thanks for joining us today, and stay tuned for the next food safety update. Feel free to contact myself or Dr. Chapman if you have any questions.